Winter, 1959. 9 young, experienced hikers set out on an expedition into the frozen wilderness of the Ural Mountains in Soviet Russia. It wasn't their first journey through harsh weather. They had survived the cold before. But this one would be their last. Somewhere along that desolate, snow-covered range, the group encountered something, or someone, that led to their deaths in one of the most disturbing and unexplained tragedies in modern history. What happened that night remains a mystery, but the evidence they left behind has baffled experts and investigators for decades. Cameras and journals belonging to the group were later found at their final campsite, giving a chilling window into their final days. Their photos, some captured just hours before the disaster, showed smiles, laughter, and camaraderie, frozen moments of joy before everything turned to horror. These weren't naive travelers. Each hiker was a skilled outdoorsman, trained and certified as a Grade 2 hiker, a prestigious accomplishment in the Soviet Union. Completing this journey would earn them Grade 3 status, the highest honor possible. This trip wasn't meant for fun. It was a test of endurance, discipline, and strength. They left behind alcohol, cigarettes, and distractions. Their leader, Igor Dyatlov, was methodical and serious. Every pack was weighed, every supply accounted for. Their goal was to reach a distant mountain called Gora Otorten, a name that in the Mansi language ominously translates to "don't go there." Still, the group pressed on, confident in their preparation. They departed on January 25th, traveling toward a small village called Vijay, their last stop before the wild. After a night of rest, they began their ascent on January 27th. But only one day into the journey, misfortune struck. Yuri Yudin, the 10th member of the team, began to experience severe pain in his joints. It wasn't unusual. He'd battled health problems all his life. But this time, it was too much. Reluctantly, Yuri turned back, saying goodbye to his friends, unaware that this decision would save his life. That goodbye was the last time anyone would see them alive. The group, now 9, pushed forward into the heart of the Ural Mountains. 7 men, 2 women, all young, all capable, all full of hope. Their leader, Igor Dyatlov, was respected and calm under pressure. His team trusted him completely. As they moved deeper into the mountains, snow thickened, temperatures plunged, and visibility fell. They lost their bearings and drifted off course, eventually finding themselves on the slopes of a mountain the local Mansi tribe called Kholat Syakhl, the Mountain of the Dead. It was late, the weather worsening. Dyatlov decided to make camp on the exposed slope rather than descend to the forest below. It was a strange choice for such an experienced leader, but perhaps he believed it safer to wait out the storm. The 9 pitched their tent, sealed it tight against the howling wind, and huddled together for warmth. That night, something happened. Something powerful enough to make 9 seasoned hikers cut open their own tent and flee into the freezing darkness, barefoot, half-dressed, terrified. None of them would ever return. Back in civilization, weeks passed with no word from Igor Dyatlov's group. Before setting out, Dyatlov had promised his friend Yuri Yudin that he'd send a telegram once the team returned from their expedition. The journey was expected to take about 16 days, maybe a few extra depending on weather conditions. But those days came and went, then weeks, and still, silence. By late February, families of the missing hikers could no longer bear the uncertainty. Their sons and daughters had vanished into the frozen Ural wilderness. Something was wrong. On February 26th, a massive search effort was launched. Students, teachers, local volunteers, and military rescuers scoured the mountains. And then, they found it. The team's tent was discovered on the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl, standing eerily intact, half buried in snow. But what the searchers saw when they approached was chilling beyond belief. The tent had been slashed open, from the inside. Not ripped by wind, not torn by animals, cut open deliberately, as though its occupants had clawed their way out in panic. Inside, everything was in order, neatly arranged gear, shoes lined up, clothing folded. The hikers had fled without their jackets, boots, or proper winter wear. Some had run into the snow wearing only socks, others in thin shirts or underwear. Something had terrified them enough to abandon warmth, safety, and logic itself. Even stranger were the footprints. Investigators followed 9 distinct sets of tracks leading away from the tent, not in chaos, not running, but in a calm, single-file line, descending the slope toward the forest below. It was as if the group had walked into the night in quiet obedience, not panic. Temperatures had dropped to -30 degrees that evening. Barefoot and half-dressed, they wouldn't have survived more than a few hours. But what forced them out into that killing cold? The discovery of the tent raised far more questions than it answered. Why was it cut open from within? Why did they walk instead of run? And most importantly, what made them leave in the first place? Search teams spread out across the surrounding forest, scanning for any sign of life. But what they would find over the next several weeks would only deepen the nightmare and reveal a series of details so disturbing that even the most logical explanations would begin to unravel. Down the slope from the tent, nearly a mile away, searchers spotted something dark beneath the snow. At first, they thought it was debris. But as they brushed away the frost, what emerged froze them to their core. 2 bodies, side by side, lay at the base of a tall cedar tree. Both men were barefoot. Their hands were scraped raw, as if they had tried to climb the tree in desperation. Above them, broken branches hung 10 feet high, proof of a frantic struggle, an attempt to escape something or someone. Nearby, the remains of a small fire still smoldered, a faint sign of life in the frozen wasteland. The men had managed to build it, maybe to signal the others, maybe just to survive. These were Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonishenko, the first of the missing hikers to be found. Between the cedar tree and the tent, 3 more bodies were discovered: Igor Dyatlov, Zina Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin, each frozen mid-stride, positioned as if they were crawling or stumbling back toward the tent. They had died one by one, collapsing in the snow, their final footprints trailing off into nothing. Dyatlov's face was turned toward the tent, his fists clenched, as though he'd been fighting the wind itself. Zina's body showed signs of blunt force trauma, her arms covered in bruises and scratches. Rustem's skull was fractured, not by a fall but by a blunt impact strong enough to cause a concussion. All 5 had died from hypothermia, at least according to early reports. But there was something off. Each body bore strange injuries, bruises, cuts, burns, details that didn't match simple exposure. And their expressions were filled with terror. The remaining 4 hikers were nowhere to be found. For months, melting snow hid their location. It wasn't until spring, when the mountain began to thaw, that searchers stumbled upon the rest of the team. But when they did, what they uncovered would change everything. It was May, 3 months after the first bodies were found. The snow had begun to melt, revealing the dark earth beneath. And with that thaw came the most disturbing discovery of all. In a wooded ravine, 75 meters from the cedar tree, searchers uncovered a faint depression in the snow, a hollow that seemed out of place. When they began to dig, the smell of decay rose through the air. Moments later, they found them. 4 more bodies, buried beneath nearly 12 feet of snow. These 4 weren't simply frozen. Thibaut Brignol's skull had been crushed, the kind of impact seen in high-speed car accidents. Zolotaryov's ribs were shattered inward. Lyudmila's tongue and eyes were missing, torn away while she was still alive. And yet, there were no signs of struggle, no footprints of an attacker, no blood in the snow. The skin was intact. The damage, investigators said, resembled that of bodies caught in the shockwave of an explosion. Even more unnerving were the details. Zolotaryov was wearing Dubinina's coat. Her foot was wrapped in pieces of Krivonishenko's torn pants. Clothing from the dead had been redistributed among the living, proof that some of them had survived for hours, maybe days, after the others had perished. But why had they wandered so far from the tent? And what had caused such catastrophic injuries? The radiation tests only deepened the mystery. Several of the hikers' clothes emitted low but measurable traces of radioactivity. Nothing lethal, but enough to raise suspicions. Soviet investigators were baffled. How could students on a simple skiing expedition end up exposed to radiation in the middle of the mountains? The official autopsy reports offered no clear answers, only contradictions. The cause of death for the final four was listed as unknown force. That was the actual phrase used by the Soviet files. Compelling unknown force. It was as if even the government couldn't explain what they'd found. Theories began to swirl like the snow that had buried them. Some claimed an avalanche drove them from their tent. Others whispered of military testing, secret weapons, or parachute mines detonated in the night sky. And then there were the stranger ideas: UFO sightings, Yeti encounters, even supernatural interference. But through it all, one fact remained impossible to ignore. 9 hikers fled into the dark that night, terrified beyond comprehension, and no one could say why. In the years that followed, the Dyatlov Pass Incident became one of the most studied and debated mysteries on Earth. Scientists, soldiers, and conspiracy theorists alike tried to piece together what could have driven 9 experienced hikers to such a horrific end. Each theory seemed possible, until it wasn't. The avalanche theory. The most common explanation came first. An avalanche. It made sense, at least on the surface. According to this idea, a sudden slab of snow collapsed above the tent, forcing the hikers to cut their way out and flee for safety. Disoriented and half-dressed, they froze to death before finding shelter. But the evidence didn't fit. There were no signs of an avalanche, no displaced snow pattern, no debris field, no broken trees or buried gear. The tent remained partially upright, and the footprints leading away were crisp and undisturbed, something impossible if tons of snow had just cascaded down the slope. The angle of the mountain was also too shallow. At just 23 degrees, it couldn't have produced the kind of avalanche needed to bury or frighten anyone. Even modern simulations have struggled to make the data align. Still, some experts argue that a rare slab avalanche, a smaller, more localized collapse, might explain the panic. A wall of snow shifting just above their heads could have made a terrifying cracking sound, convincing them the entire mountain was coming down. But even then, why not return once the danger passed? Why die half-naked, miles from safety? The military testing theory. Next came whispers of a Soviet cover-up. In the late 1950s, the Ural Mountains were used for secret weapons testing, parachute mines, infrared flares, and experimental explosives. Some believe the hikers may have accidentally wandered into a restricted zone and witnessed something they weren't meant to see. This could explain the strange lights reported in the sky around the same time. Glowing orbs drifting over the mountains, seen by other hikers and locals. It could also explain the internal injuries, the kind consistent with powerful shock waves. If a nearby explosion startled them, they might have cut their way out of the tent, fleeing blindly into the storm. But there's a darker possibility, that they weren't just startled, but silenced. Some investigators claim military patrols arrived at the scene first, long before the official search began. Others point to missing documents, altered photographs, and the phrase "compelling unknown force" as evidence of censorship. But without proof, the theory remains speculation, a shadow in the fog. The infrasound theory. Then there's a theory born from physics itself, infrasound. Under certain conditions, strong winds passing over the mountain can create low-frequency vibrations that induce panic, nausea, and hallucinations in humans. If the hikers were caught in one of these rare natural phenomena, it could have triggered mass hysteria. They might have fled the tent in a state of primal terror, unaware of what they were running from. But again, why didn't they come back? Even fear subsides eventually, and yet, not one of them returned to safety. The supernatural theories. As beyond science, there are stories, whispers that refuse to die. The local Mansi people called the mountain Kholat Syakhl, the mountain of the dead. They warned travelers to stay away. Some believe the hikers disturbed something sacred, awakening an ancient curse that claimed their lives. Others insist they encountered something not of this world. Strange lights in the sky, mutilated bodies, radiation burns, all feeding the idea of an extraterrestrial encounter. It sounds absurd, until you see the evidence, until you see the missing eyes, the missing tongue, the crushed ribs without external trauma, until you realize that even today, no one, not scientists, not soldiers, not governments, can fully explain what happened there. No theory fits completely. Every answer only opens more questions. Whatever occurred on that mountain in February of 1959, it left behind a scene that defies logic, a moment frozen in time, preserved in ice, and echoing across decades. 9 friends went into the wild, none of them came back, and the Ural Mountains still keep their secret. When the investigation closed in 1959, the Soviet authorities offered only one conclusion. The hikers died due to a compelling unknown force. That phrase, vague, haunting, and evasive, became the final word on the Dyatlov Pass Incident. No arrests, no witnesses, no truth. The case was quietly buried beneath classified files and red tape. Families were told little, and the world soon moved on. But the questions never stopped echoing through the Ural Mountains, and neither did the fascination. Decades later, the site of the tragedy would earn a name that chills anyone who hears it: Dyatlov Pass. Researchers have returned countless times, searching for clarity. Scientists with instruments, journalists with cameras, even paranormal investigators with more questions than answers. Each expedition uncovers new details, new fragments, yet somehow the mystery only grows deeper. Modern studies have proposed everything from katabatic winds to microslab avalanches, blending science and speculation. Each theory brings us closer, yet never close enough. Because no matter how rational the explanations become, one image remains impossible to erase: 9 terrified hikers cutting their way out of safety and into the freezing dark. The surviving friend, Yuri lived the rest of his life with that burden. He often said he felt he was meant to die with them, that fate had chosen him by mistake. When asked what he thought truly happened that night, he could never give an answer. He simply said, "Something caused them to leave that tent. Something they couldn't fight." More than 60 years have passed, and the snow still covers that lonely slope on Kholat Syakhl. The wind still howls across the ridge where the tent once stood, erasing tracks, silencing truth. The mountain keeps its secret. 9 young lives remain frozen in time, their final steps echoing through history, their story whispered by the wind, their fate a reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be solved. Because sometimes, the most terrifying thing isn't what we find in the dark, it's never finding out at all.